In 1986, Mike Richardson founded Dark Horse Comics and set about trying to develop a concept he first conceived of a few years earlier. The series drew on the parable of the monkey's paw, a wish come true eventually becoming the sum of all fears. In this case, a mask that would grant its wearer reality-altering powers that would in turn warp the individual's psyche. Inspiration came from certain clown prints of crime from the Batman comics, Steve Ditko's DC anti-hero The Creeper, and of course the curious case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Richardson would then bring on Marvel Comics writer Mark Badger, who had worked on such titles as Power Pack, Doctor Strange, and The Incredible Hulk. And this was to develop Mask, that's M-A-S-Q-U-E, for the anthology book Dark Horse Presents. Unfortunately, it didn't really pan out, and Badger was soon off the project, leaving Richardson back at square one. In this second attempt, Richard brought on artist Chris Warner, best known for his work on Barbed Wire, to revamp the story for a different anthology series called Mayhem. In turn, Richardson also would turn to writer John Arcudi and artist Doug Mahnke to flesh things out further. The title was then altered, with a "the" being added and "mask" being changed to its phonetic spelling. I'm not sure how effective the name change really was, as I can recall my brother and I spending most of the summer of 1994 having to explain to various members of our family that we were not super excited to see the Eric Stoltz movie from 1985. Warner helped give the mask a new madcap and maniacal nature, dubbing it The Terminator by Tex Avery. And after Mayhem was cancelled, the mask story would be compiled into a special Zero issue, followed by a 4-issue miniseries. What followed proved to be one of Dark Horse Comics' first big hits and would even cross over into the realm of film and animated television. Today we're looking at the Mask's first few appearances in Mayhem as well as his first 3 miniseries. This is The Mask Omnibus, Volume 1. Stanley Ipkiss peruses a curio shop in search of a present for his girlfriend Catherine. After settling on a jade mask that strikes his fancy, Stanley exits the store to find his car has been dinged by a local biker gang called the Butchers. He cusses the group's leader, who unfortunately was still in earshot, and the group goes easy on him by only pummeling him a little bit in the mud. Stanley fumes all the way back to the apartment he shares with Catherine. He's so angry that he almost begins hearing the mask trying to goad him into going after the Butchers, but not the blade. Instead, Stanley presents the mask to Catherine, who's ecstatic as she spotted the object a few weeks earlier. She's so overjoyed that Stanley ends up getting a present of his own. After the happy fun time, Stanley goes to the bathroom to find the mask sitting on the toilet. Thinking this is a prank from Catherine, he decides to place it on his face to try to get her back. Then the next thing you know... Smoking! Actually, he only just says tee-hee. Now sporting a giant green head, Stanley heads outside to test the abilities of this new form. He gets struck by a car but heals quickly. This inspires him to try doing good, just after he's settled a few personal scores. Stanley dons the human guise of a gay hustler to infiltrate the Butchers. Once inside, he slaughters the group by producing several weapons out of nowhere. Afterwards, Stanley returns home to where Catherine thinks she spies the new mask form, but Stanley assures her that it's nothing and just turns on the news. I should point out that the media begins referring to the masked persona as Big Head because, well, duh. Anyway, he wouldn't officially become the Mask until well after the movie came out, so yeah, I'm just going to be referring to either the mask wearer by their name or Big Head from now on. Stanley sets out making a list of those who have wronged him through the years. He also starts dressing up like a cheesy militia guy and reading Soldier of Fortune magazines. His relationship with Catherine begins to crack to the point that he almost hits her. Still, he just takes the mask and heads out. First up on the list are the 2 shyster mechanics who continuously rig Stanley's car to fail. They get turned into human mufflers. After that, it's Stanley's old teacher, Mrs. Gazzo. She gets bludgeoned to death in front of her class. These actions have not gone unnoticed, and soon police detectives Mitch Kellaway and Lionel Ray are dispatched on the case. Coincidentally, Stanley and Catherine's landlady is also named Kellaway. I don't know if there was ever supposed to be any relation, or the creators just weren't very good at coming up with names. While Stanley sleeps off his escapades, Catherine slips into the bedroom and throws out the mask. She informs him on waking up and points out that he was scaring her and she just wants her old Stanley back. He realizes that she's right, not to mention he got everyone on his list. Any attempts at returning to normal, though, fall apart when Stanley cracks up in a news report of Big Head's antics. Catherine kicks Stanley out and he begins drumming through the garbage as he realizes he actually missed out on someone named McWhorter who owes him a great deal of money. Stanley soon realizes the truth, that Catherine didn't actually throw out the mask, so he waits for her to go to bed and then tries to sneak in through her window. Unfortunately, Catherine soon wakes up and thinking Stanley is a robber, which he kind of is, she bonks him on the head and calls the police. Realizing her mistake, Catherine tries to explain the situation to the police. While that plays out, Stanley comes to and locates the mask. Big Head soon starts bludgeoning police officers to death while Catherine manages to piece together what just happened. Big Head then steals a cop car with the suspect still inside and then races off to find McWhirter, the guy who owes him $60. A vehicular bloodbath worthy of the Blues Brothers breaks out as Big Head pursues McWhirter only to find himself being pursued by Kellaway and Lionel. Turning his attention back to the police, Big Head kills more cops with a flamethrower before giving them a slip via the sewers. Physically drained, Stanley makes his way back to the apartment and removes his mask as he prepares to skip town, thinking he's alone. He's not, as Catherine soon emerges from the shadows, grabs the mask, and puts it on. She then shoots Stanley through the back, killing him instantly.
Okay, so this actually marks the end of the issues that first ran in Mayhem and were then compiled into issue 0. From here, we transition into the first 4-issue Mask miniseries simply called The Mask.
As Big Head is blamed for Stanley Ipkiss's murder, which is, well, partly true, the mask is pleased to be with its new owner. However, Catherine has other plans in mind as she realizes the power is too much and she needs to get rid of the mask as soon as possible. Since Detective Kellaway was nice to her through the whole affair, she elects to drop the mask off with him. Things haven't been going too well for Kellaway as he bore the brunt of the blame for Big Head getting away, and added to that, a major drug bust of a dealer named Rapaz has been scuttled due to the heroin being found at the scene mysteriously disappearing from the evidence locker at the district attorney's office. Also, he broke his arm. Catherine turns the mask over to Kellaway, vaguely explaining that it's responsible for Big Head. She doesn't go into specifics, but does give the detective the message to never put it on and keep it out of the evidence locker. Not really knowing why, Kellaway keeps his word and takes the mask home. Unfortunately, the stress of recent events gets to the detective and he decides to slip the mask on. Big Head was reborn with a newly healed arm. Now Kellaway could use this power to help the cops. Or just commit acts of petty revenge.
Because, you know, that worked so well the last time.
Big Head puts his abilities to use by breaking up a robbery. He kills the group's getaway driver and chases the other two down on foot. When they believe they've given him the slip, they try doubling back to the car, only to find him waiting for them with a balloon animal Tommy gun. The next day, when Kellaway goes into work, he has good spirits, even going as far as to call Catherine to assure her that her worries about the mask are over. Sadly, Kellaway's chipper mood doesn't last, as Assistant District Attorney Steve Lister informs him that Rapaz has to be left alone from now on.
Yes, Assistant District Attorney Lister is in fact on the take. He's being paid by the head honcho of this crime organization named Don Mazzo.
Rapaz and his chief henchman Walter go after the informant who snitched on them. They give him a fatal overdose of heroin and leave him as a message for the authorities. Kellaway wants to go after Rapaz, but once more Lister calls him off. So now it's up to Big Head, right after dealing with another call from Catherine. Big Head goes after Rapaz by disguising himself as a drug addict and soliciting the dealer for a fix. Walter intervenes, but Big Head shoots the giant henchman full of bullets. When that proves to be ineffective, he tries electrocuting him. From there, it's on to Rapaz, who he corners in an alley and then stuffs a bomb into his pants. The next morning, Kellaway wakes up pleased, especially when he receives a call from Lionel about the incident. However, a wrinkle pops up in the form of a drug addict who witnessed the entire event. Now the public knows that Big Head is back in business, and to that end, Kellaway and Lionel are put on a task force to try to catch the anarchist.
You know, it's funny. The main character of the Mask movie was Stanley Ipkiss, but the Stanley Ipkiss in the comics doesn't act anything like the Stanley Ipkiss in the movie. In fact, movie Stanley actually acts more like Detective Kellaway's Big Head persona, with the wackiness and the off-the-wall antics. Stanley's is way more serious and dark and disturbing. A few other differences from the movie include the fact that Catherine is not a lounge slinger slash mobster girlfriend. The mask is in no way connected to the Norse trickster deity Loki, and in the movie the mask couldn't work during the day, it only worked at night, whereas in the comics it seems to work during the day just fine.
Kellaway's captain gives the detective some money and a tape recorder for the witness. Instead, he chooses to go after the kid as Big Head and gives him a hefty amount of heroin to skip town. He then goes after several others to bring down Don Mazzo. The only real result is that Kellaway gets placed on suspension. On his way home, Kellaway hears a report about a mob shootout at a restaurant. A rival of the Mazzo family is being blamed for Big Head killing Rapaz. Catherine watches a report on TV and spots Kellaway electing to enter the establishment unarmed, except of course he has the mask with him, and soon Big Head takes down all the bad guys, with Kellaway getting all the credit. He gets rewarded with a pink slip. The captain rips Kellaway a new one for his vigilante actions and calls for his badge.
Because we all know the police hate Caucasian vigilantes.
Kellaway returns home to find Catherine waiting for him, demanding the mask back. He knows she's right, but points out that she can't be trusted either. The two reach a compromise, with Kellaway locking the mask in a drawer that most certainly could not just be opened by an axe, and giving Catherine the only key. Two more wrinkles pop up as it turns out that Walter, Rapaz's henchman from earlier, is still alive. Craving some bizarre form of revenge, Walter begins ripping apart the diner that Big Head was at earlier. He gets arrested and brought before the judge, but Lister managed to argue for a light sentence. However, unbeknownst to the assistant district attorney, Lionel has turned up one of Lister's cards on the bodies from the diner massacre earlier. He gives the card to Calloway as he cleans up his desk, and he rushes home to demand the key back from Catherine. Unfortunately, all he gets is her machine, and he's so impatient that he has no choice but to grab an axe.
Who knew?
Not exactly caring who sees him, Big Head literally rips Lister out of his car and drags him into his office. He then tears the place apart looking for evidence. He eventually finds what he needs in a safe and leaves it and Lister for the authorities. Big Head then demands Calloway's reinstatement, only to get shot at as a response. Lionel then tries running Big Head over with a car, which proves ineffective, and the captain just running off. Big Head then squares off with Lionel and beats the detective into unconsciousness. Big Head then prepares to stick a piece of dynamite into Lionel's mouth. However, this is when Calloway has a moment of clarity, and he takes off, removing the mask in the process. A few hours later, and Catherine arrives at Calloway's home to demand the mask back for good, but there's no point, as Calloway has buried the mask under this concrete floor in his basement.
That concludes the first Mask miniseries. We now move on to The Mask Returns.
It's been a month since Calloway buried the mask in his basement, but Don Mazzo wants vengeance. He sends a squad of goons to take out Calloway. The former detective has no other choice but to attempt digging the mask up. Unfortunately, just as he unearths the mask, Calloway is shot through the back. Curious as to why Calloway wanted this mask so much, the gang takes the mask to Don Mazzo in order to sell it. Goofing around with the object, they slip it over the face of Nunzio, their getaway driver. The rush of power causes Big Head to drive up to 100 miles an hour and then slam on the brakes, killing everyone but him. Tripping on his new power, Nunzio elects to take his big shot at being somebody. He storms into Don Mazzo's office only to find that Mazzo is in Miami. So he proclaims himself the new head of the family, using the fact that he's Big Head to keep any other underlings in line. That's not enough though for Big Head, as he soon crashes the wedding being thrown by a rival Don named Pescado. He sets the wedding party up the bomb during the group photograph. From there, he goes on to take out the Triad and the Yakuza.
I should point out that the city these stories take place in is never officially named. It's just kind of called Big City. Although the name of the newspaper would seem to indicate this takes place in the twin cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota.
Catherine is with Lionel in the hospital as Calloway is in a coma. She blames herself for what happened, though she doesn't go into any details about the mask, and is determined to try to set things right. Before Lionel can dig deeper, Catherine leaves. Back at Mazzo's old headquarters with Big Ed, he gets a surprise new visitor. Catherine is there because she likes powerful men with giant green heads. She spends the next few days feigning romantic interest as the remaining rivals prepare to take revenge on Big Head. It's about as effective as you would think. Big Head's actions really put Kathy in the mood for some super happy fun time, and the two slip away to one of Mazzo's safe houses. As this is happening, Don Mazzo tries to reclaim power by arranging for Walter to get an early release and then rushing back to the city. Back at Mazzo's safe house in the bedroom, Big Head prepares to get some lovin', only for Catherine to talk him into removing the mask first.
Thankfully for Catherine, the mask isn't trying to tip Nunzio off to her true intentions.
The second the mask is off and Nunzio is normal again, Catherine pulls out a gun. She doesn't want to shoot him, but her hand is forced when Nunzio makes a lunge for the mask. The commotion brings up a group of goons who spot Catherine and drive her into the attic. With no other choice, she puts the mask on and has to blast her way to freedom.
We never exactly get a true origin for the mask outside of a weird dream sequence that Catherine has involving a group of paid relic hunters who swiped the mask from a tribe of indeterminate origin that was using the mask as part of a ritual sacrifice.
Catherine knows she can't be trusted with the mask and sets about trying to think of a way to get rid of it. While she does, Walter meets with Don Mazzo about bringing down Big Head, beginning with the destruction of Mazzo's old headquarters as they think he's still in charge there. Coincidentally, this kills a pickpocket who is trying to steal the mask from Catherine. This proves to be the straw that broke the camel's back for Catherine, and she puts the mask on and begins blowing away the hitmen. She then demands from the last survivor to be taken to Don Mazzo. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Lionel mentions to the still comatose Calloway that Big Head is back, which causes him to begin stirring. Big Head storms into Mazzo's abandoned warehouse and confronts the mob boss, only to be blasted through the chest by Walter. When she recovers, he does it again, and again, and again. Finally, she ducks behind some boxes and removes the mask. She tries to throw Walter off the scent, but he soon pieces together the ruse and catches back up to her just as she's trying to throw the mask into the river. All of the action at the waterfront has brought the authorities, and when word gets to Calloway, he escapes his hospital bed and steals a car. As this is happening, Catherine puts the mask back on, but to little avail, so Catherine gives up and tries to turn the mask over to Walter. It's then that Calloway comes crashing through the warehouse wall in a car. He runs over Walter, and then he and Catherine manage to get to safety as the mask and presumably Walter burn in the collapsing building. Believing that Calloway has finally killed Big Head, actually manages to get him his job back on the force.
Of course, this doesn't mark the end for The Mask at all, as we conclude this omnibus volume with a look at the miniseries The Mask Strikes Back.
It's been a month since Big Head vanished. To young anarchist Rick, it still feels like yesterday. He makes daily visits to the pier while being ribbed by his crew. Failed musician Ben, recovering drug addict Hugo, and nerd Archie. This time, however, he finds something as he smashes the ground in anger. Meanwhile, Kellaway and Lionel are called to the hospital. A patient has escaped. It's Walter. He got out of bed and leapt 40 feet to freedom. Back with Rick's clique, they fritter their spare time away by reading comics. That is, until they suddenly get a visit from Big Head. He begins tearing through Archie's pile of comics when they soon piece together that it's Rick behind the mask, and there is much rejoicing.
Okay, I'm going to point out a nice little touch that the artist did here. When Rick is in his normal persona, he actually has a big picture of Big Head on the back of his jacket. However, when he's wearing the mask, it changes to a picture of Rick on the back of the jacket.
Piecing together that the mask is a dream come true, the others attempt to get in on the head action, but Rick has some hell to go raise. He then proceeds to violate several copyrights as he leaves. Days go by, and Big Head is causing a ruckus as Rick's buddies continue fantasizing about what they will do with the mask. Archie in particular wants to know more about the nature of this being. Meanwhile, Walter meets up with an old co-worker who's now in tight with the Russians. However, when a news report of Big Head's antics comes out over the radio, Walter is off on his own. Walter bumps into Big Head outside a police precinct which just blew up. The two start fighting as the news reaches Rick's clique as well as Kellaway and Catherine.
Yeah, Catherine and Detective Kellaway became a couple at some point. It was hinted at early on in the story that they planned to meet for dinner shortly after Kellaway locked the mask in the desk drawer, but nothing ever seemed to come of it.
Everyone makes their way to the town square where Walter absorbs every threat the Big Head attempts, including a giant army of imaginary animals. It's all fun until a kid is almost injured, and this proves to be too much, and Big Head dives into the sewers to escape as Archie calls out Rick's name within earshot of Kellaway. Rick makes it back to Archie's where Ben is waiting. He rips off the mask because it isn't fun anymore. Rick tries to tell Ben to leave the mask alone, but it's too late, and now Big Head is off to launch his new music career. Meanwhile, Archie and Hugo are brought in for questioning. Kellaway knows that they know about the mask, but they aren't talking. They're not suspects or being charged with anything, so they're free to go. Catherine then thinks it's time to probably explain to Lionel everything about the mask.
Yeah, you'd think those two would have done that at this point.
Big Head is at a nearby dive bar showing off his mad thrashing skills on the guitar. It's impressive enough that he's made the lead performer for that night with a huge cut of the gate. Flyers for the performance pop up all over town, alerting Rick, Hugo, and Archie. Kellaway tails the teens to the club. Big Head takes the stage, slicks his hair back, and begins crooning a love ballad to the disgust of the crowd. Kellaway and Lionel then spot Walter entering the facility and rush in after him. Walter stabs Big Head through the chest with a guitar. Big Head then takes his now literal axe to Walter to zero effect. The stage collapses and Ben manages to escape into a back alley. His life and dream destroyed, he decides to rip off the mask and give it to Hugo. Archie then spots the police coming and the group splits up for safety, leaving Hugo alone with the mask.
Also, there's this weird subplot involving a lion that inexplicably has golden teeth. Walter seems to think that Big Head is going to come after this lion for some reason. It pays off later, I think. I'm not entirely sure.
Though the rest of the world sees Hugo as himself, he's actually wearing the mask. With it on, Hugo begins experiencing the greatest acid trip ever. While Hugo is out, the others are questioned by Kellaway and Lionel, who's still in the closet about the mask. Kellaway pieces together Rick's identity and begins trying to rip the mask off. As for Hugo, he's made it back to his home. Still tripping, he sits down for dinner with his family. Unfortunately, that's when the trip turns bad, and Hugo sees his kinfolk turn into monsters and runs away. He rushes back to Archie's, where the police have left. He struggles to get the mask off, and not trusting Rick or Ben, he tosses it to Archie. However, Archie decides that he can use the mask to become the superhero he's always wanted to be.
Here we go again! I couldn't afford the wacky sitcom music.
Archie heads to the zoo and the golden-mouthed lion. He spots two goons trying to break into the facility. Big Head makes quick work of both of them and then for some reason decides he needs backup. So he frees the lion and several other animals in order to deputize them. Unfortunately, all this is done is attract the attention of Walter. The Big Head tries to fight Walter as best he can, but again, it's to little avail, and Walter just tosses him around. As this is happening, Catherine and Kellaway finally explain to Lionel what the deal is with the mask. They then get a call about the ruckus at the zoo as Big Head tries to give Walter the slip by running into a graveyard. The detectives, along with Archie's friends, try to talk Big Head down, but Walter catches up and begins continuing the attack. Thankfully, the lion of all creatures actually does come into play and manages to drive Walter into the nearby lake. The moment of peace allows for Kellaway to approach Archie. He points out that he too tried to wear the mask for good intentions, but the problem is it always falls apart. In fact, Archie himself hasn't been acting very heroic. He just loosed a bunch of wild animals into the general populace. The mask needs to be left alone. This proves to be enough for Archie to give up and remove the mask. However, before he can turn it over to Calloway, Walter leaps out of the lake and grabs it. Walter then places the mask on his head and it falls off. He tries again. Once more, it falls off. It turns out Walter's head is just too big for the mask.
I'm calling shenanigans. It's already been revealed the mask contorts itself around the head of whomever is trying to wear it. And this isn't a thing from the movie either. It happened the first time Stanley Ipkiss put the mask on in the comics as well.
Disgusted, Walter throws the mask off into the lake, much to Calloway's chagrin. He then turns himself in. As Calloway and Lionel take Walter into custody, the teens return home with the knowledge that the mask is finally gone. For now.
And that concludes our look at The Mask Omnibus Volume 1. How was it? Well, on the plus side, I really like the darkly comedic tone of this book coupled with Doug Mahnke's artwork. In fact, I actually like the progression Mahnke's artwork takes throughout the story. At the beginning it looks good, but by the end it looks really polished and well done and just spot on. You can see a lot of the traits that he would later take to books like Green Lantern and Frankenstein Agent of Shade at DC. Not to mention, this book is very briskly paced. This thing went by pretty quickly for the most part. If I do have any problems with it, the Walter stuff gets really repetitive. I mean, it's one of those, he's an unkillable hitman, and then he's an unkillable hitman. That's just like everything they throw at him doesn't kill him, and then he comes back, and he comes back, and he comes back, and it's like, you know, maybe they could have given him a rest for a miniseries. I think that would have been fine. And, you know, I said the pacing was good for the most part, but the last miniseries really does drag out. This was 2 issues that got padded out to 5 for some reason. Like, I think you could have just done 2 issues, like I said, 2 issues where it's like 2 issues of 2 characters and then 2 issues of the other 2 characters. So, Rick and Ben, and then Hugo and Archie. I think it would have worked a lot better. It felt way too padded, and the pacing just kind of, like, became all mushy. It didn't work at all. Still, those are pretty minor nitpicks, and this is a very enjoyable read. I'm going to be giving The Mask Omnibus Volume 1 an A. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Remember, you can help support my channel at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcatproductions. There, you can request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. Also, remember, like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.